Byline Times was not kidding when they said they were going to have Dan Wooten drops in October. We've had not one, not two, but 3 drops in the last 48 hours. I'm going to go through the highlights of the 3 articles and the things that you need to know. If you missed any part of this investigation by Byline Times, I have covered it extensively. It is under my Dan Wooten scandal playlist. First up, from October 1st, 2023, GB News axes Dan Wooten after Fox and catfish scandal. The full story. And they have axes in quotations because that is what their inside sources at GB News say is going to happen. He is not coming back because of several reasons. This is a very lengthy article, but it also confirms what Tortoise Media said in their newsletter this past week. GB News' Sir Paul Marshall is looking to clean the decks at GB News so it could be seen as a legitimate news source so that he can potentially buy the Daily Telegraph and the Sunday Telegraph, which honestly would be very scary if he had that kind of control. He would be the kingmaker for the Tories. It's not great. According to sources, people were relieved when Dan exited the building. There has been anger and disappointment over the negative attention. I would argue that that attention is bigger than Dan, but okay. This article also alleges that he might be considering a move back to his home in New Zealand. Sorry, Kiwis. This article also states that Marshall had been losing his patience with Dan for months now, which adds to the theory that it wasn't so much that Ava Evans was the final straw, but the straw that they were looking for so they could finally reasonably get rid of Wootton and Fox. According to this article, GB News has its own editorial charter, which includes no ad hominem attacks on individuals, which LOL. I also think that some of the people speaking to Byline Times, such as someone in the finance world, are trying to position Marshall as less extreme, as someone that doesn't like Wootton's brand of reporting. I think this idea that he does not like this extreme tabloid style is to lend credence that he would be the right owner for a more serious publication like The Telegraph. Here's another LOL. There was concern that Wootton's antics were making GB News a parody of the free speech channel it was intended to be. It sat very poorly with the original vision to set a credible alternative tone for the right-of-center political conversation in the UK. Okay. What also didn't help Dan Wooten was that the viewership for his show declined once Byline Times started reporting on him. Also, there were some advertisers that did not want to advertise on his show, and that is what tips the scale. Money. This isn't about Dan not fitting the culture of GB News, because I would argue that he seems like he is the culture in many circumstances, which we will get into in a later article. Ad revenue loss, a declining viewership, and the co-owner trying to buy the Telegraph. Yeah, Dan, your job was in trouble. Not for the reasons it should have been, but I digress. Byline Times also drops this bombshell that in July, in a meeting with Angelos, the CEO of GB News, Dan Wooten admitted to being Martin Branning. Allegedly, but he claimed it was a cover so that he could go on dating apps because he was too well known to use his actual name. Okay. The Ofcom cases relating to Dan Wooten at GB News also did not help his case. Moving on to bombshell number 2. And this is the second big piece of news. Police investigating Dan Wooten over allegations of 10-year catfishing campaign following Byline Times special investigation. It says detectives from the complex investigation team of the force's Central Specialist Crime Division are looking into serious allegations relating to the obtaining of sexual images by deception and blackmail. Now, all the Met Police spokesperson would say to the paper was that, quote, in June 2023, the Metropolitan Police was contacted with regards to allegations of sexual offenses committed by a man aged in his 40s, end quote. Now, Byline Times just happened to have submitted a 28-page dossier on Dan Wooten to the police on June 20th, 2023. Dan is also in his 40s. I think there is very good reason to believe that that person is Dan Wooten. I'm just not sure I would have framed the headline this way. That's just my own editorial preference. But whatever they received gave them cause to open an actual criminal investigation. And finally, 5 GB newsmen accused of sexual impropriety as channel engulfed by Wooten-Fox misogyny storm. If you recall, one of the more recent pieces from Byline Times did promise that they were going to look more into GB News. And as I said in an earlier video, this has always been bigger than Dan. Because let's play this out. Dan has a known history for being a POS in the media industry in Britain. It truly seems like there is no love lost with most journalists over what is happening to Dan right now. From all accounts, it has been a well-kept media secret. So it's really hard to believe that GB News hired Dan and did not know any of these rumors, that they weren't aware at all. And despite all the talk about GB News not being this kind of media group, not being this kind of television station, I think this is exactly who they are. And this article certainly proves that point. Trigger warning, we are clearly talking about SA and also R, so if that is going to be too much for you, please skip. Byline Times spoke to over a dozen people over these allegations. The first one concerns a senior male GB News employee who left his previous role at another media organization, having been accused of R, a junior female colleague. This happened following after-work drinks in a hotel room. She ended up leaving her job. And he got to leave his role and join GB News. And according to a source in this article, the details of the allegations were known to people within GB News. In fact, people were allegedly so upset at GB News that this man ended up being placed into a role where they would not have to share a studio space. Real safe work environment. Going back, it is hard to believe that in this very small ecosystem, GB News did not know about these serious allegations against this man. So serious that he left his job. Then there's Darren Grimes, and never has a more fitting last name been placed on an individual. Grimes is a GB News presenter who is also gay, and he was persistently sexually harassing a junior straight male colleague. Who does that sound like? Grimes was calling, texting, inviting him to hotel rooms. And because of power imbalance, the victim was afraid to come forward. But he was forced to do so when Grimes started spreading rumors about this man. And the worst part is, and this is why I always believe victims first and foremost, is that at first bosses tried to dismiss it as an office crush. If it's not reciprocated, it's not a crush. It's harassment. Last September, Grimes was removed from his presenting role, but eventually put back into it. And who was on his side advocating for him at the misconduct hearing? Dan Wooten. Wonder if he saw a little bit of himself in Grimes. Third source added, quote, as far as the complainant went, GB News' safeguarded amounted to letting them know by text when Grimes was due to be in the studio so he could avoid him, end quote. No, totally a better strategy than just getting rid of the problem. Great. Then there was a third man who left a previously highly paid freelance role accused of groping women at work parties. When I tell you women, marginalized individuals, have to think about their safety wherever they are, even at something that should be so safe like a work event or walking in daylight. We are always calculating our safety in any situation and how we can get out of a situation without getting hurt. Just something for straight white men to think about, and think about ways that they can help make the world safer for all of us. And then there was the 5-figure settlement to an employee who threatened to bring an employment claim in which sexual harassment was alleged against its chief executive, Angelos Frangopoulos. I think that's how you say his last name, but I really don't care because he sounds like a dirtbag. This married father of 5 was alleged to have propositioned and declared feelings for a female member of staff in a late-night phone call after work drinks in 2021. And once he was rebuffed, he retaliated against her. It got so bad that she ended up leaving, but not before coming after him and settling and signing an NDA. I really hate that they have to sign NDAs. I almost feel like that shouldn't be a thing. Yes, he paid, but was it really justice? There's also alleged racism at GB News. I know, shocker. A woman went on sick leave when she was told she was so ugly she should put a bag on her head and that she should open her legs to win a promotion. What in the Mad Men is going on here? But also completely predictable. Dan Wooten is but a symptom of a larger problem. It is truly the audacity and hypocrisy of GB News to point fingers at the BBC over Hugh Edwards or Philip Schofield knowing full well what was going on in their own home. I mean, they have to be in violation of employment laws, at least. So that is the latest from Byline Times. It seems like we are closing in on GB News and also keeping an eye on police investigations. Stay tuned for more.